Hog Money, your guide to the economy of Bermuda.
Okay, we're back with Hog Money, your guide to the economy of Bermuda. And we have some great guests in studio today, as well as my co-host, Robert Stewart. Now we're going to get right back on this topic. Jonathan, you said something earlier about, not being generational, and most people still have a work, and a lot of people still have a work ethic. And I agree with that. I tend to agree. A funny thing that's happening in Bermuda, I won't call it a migration because I don't think there's any real numbers on it, but we do hear on the ground that, there are a lot of ladies in particular with kids who try to leave Bermuda to go to the UK to get on benefits. It's not like they're going there to really, try to make some better life or create this business. They're actually going there because they feel they can get better benefits from the government without having to really do as much. So what do you have to say to that?
I would say it sounds more like an urban myth than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Until I see the data and interviews with the people, it sounds very much more like just rhetoric coming from people resentful or opposed to welfare. I don't know if Cordell is a statistician and research person. If you've conducted any research on this, you might be better at speaking on that issue. But to me, it just sounds like an urban myth.
Yeah, there's no real data on the number of people who have left Bermuda or young families who've left Bermuda simply to get on welfare. If you talk to the Coalition for Protection of Children, they would say there have been a dozen or a couple of dozen or so that they know of that's going to the UK. I don't think they're going there just to be on under the dole, so to speak. I think they're going there because I think they prefer to stay in Bermuda. Is that their inability in Bermuda to get employment, to get help, that has caused them. Because to pick up and go to another country is not an easy thing to do. So one is almost at the stage of desperation to do that. So it's not about going there for the dole. It's about trying to get a better living for themselves. I certainly know a few people who have gone there. They've got their children in schools and they're getting their education and they're working their way through the system. It's to seek a better life. The same things that people come here for, to seek a better life. It's no different.
As I did many years ago.
As you did many years ago. There you go.
Now, when it comes to financial assistance, I think that from me doing my research, I think that it is something based around low income. And I know, Jonathan, you're an advocate of this minimum wage or having some sort of minimum wage. I tend to agree that maybe it does cause a problem. But on the other hand, if somebody is willing to work for $10 and you're running a business, you're able to operate your business with a better profit. So tell me about the low earners, the people who are out there working. They're hard workers, but because of education or whatever it may be, they're unable to earn lots of money. But they work a 35, 40-hour week. What do you want to say to that? And how do you think that weighs in with the whole financial assistance aspect?
Well, to begin with, I think it's important that we clarify some numbers from the financial assistance budget. Right now, the bulk of financial assistance in monetary terms goes to seniors and disabled. The number of people on financial assistance, I believe it's 32% of people on financial assistance are seniors. 29% of people in financial assistance are disabled people. And off that, $20.5 million goes to covering seniors, $15.5 million goes to covering disabled people, and this is out of a total budget of $40 million for financial assistance. So only about $4 million is going to people who are able-bodied and under 65. And of those people, the people able-bodied under 65, that's not just unemployed people, that's low earners. So that's underemployed people as well. So a lot of these people are wanting to work, a lot of them are working very hard. It's just a matter of the fact that there are no jobs out there, or the jobs that do exist there do not pay adequately enough for them to be off financial assistance. Now, you brought up minimum wage. Now, Bermuda doesn't have that, but the UK introduced that, I think, in around 2000, under the first Blair government. They set up a commission, did all this research, and they report back, I think, every 5 years on the impact of minimum wage. And a lot of the employer class, the business class in the UK, they opposed minimum wage. And they said, this is going to affect our profits, you're going to have capital flight. You know what they found out? Growth actually increased, because they found that workers more productive, They had better security at work. They were less stressed out. You had less stress-related absences. Productivity, as I said, increased. It actually benefited both workers and business.
Okay, you want to add anything to add to that?
Yes. There was that concern anytime that the minimum wage is being increased, that it's going to cause businesses to fail and all sorts of things like that. Certainly in the United States, very few have actually failed. What we've seen is the economy actually grow, primarily because those who are getting that money actually spend it back in the economy. And everyone knows, I'm sure Mr. Stewart would agree, that you grow the economy by people spending in the economy. Otherwise, we all can keep our money and don't have to worry about the economy growing. But I think what we found is that there has been that case where there has been that resistance to increasing minimum wage. Certainly in Bermuda's case, you can make a case for minimum wage because you have a lot of people earning very little money, $5 an hour, for instance. I'm reading a book which I should have read years ago called Nickel and Dime. It was written in 1998 about a wealthy. Sorry,
I've read it. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's familiar with it. A wealthy woman who went undercover to see what it was like to live like the working poor, and they were earning in 1998. $6.750, which is what more than what people are earning in Bermuda today, where the cost of living is so much higher. I think a minimum wage would certainly cause people to hire Bermudians because when you have a depressed economy like this, it has a downward pressure on wages, and people sort of say, well, this is what we offer, take it or leave it, because they know there are a number of people who come behind to take that up. But if you have a minimum wage, then you would have less of that, certainly. That's just one aspect.
But I would say this to that too. So what then makes a person become more creative if a government is going to say make up the difference, right? Coming back to the financial assistance, if the government is going to make up the difference for low earners, then where do I find the motivation and the creativity to find a way to make up the difference myself?
I don't think it's a matter of the individual needing creativity. The fact is, it's just not the jobs out there. I mean, there is some degree for entrepreneurship, but for that, you need some business skills, you need some experience, you need access to capital to get a loan in the first place. A lot of people who are on low incomes or in this low pay, no pay cycle, they just don't have access to capital, human or financial. So it's very, very difficult to get that mobility, to get out of that trap.
And I might say that certainly from my perspective, when I was working for myself full time, I took on part-time jobs. That was sort of like financial assistance because that provided you with the basics to cover your food and things like that so that you can do those creative things and be able to earn money. So when you're unemployed, the last thing you want to be thinking about is how I'm going to keep my lights on, how I'm going to put food in my table. You have enough challenges finding a job as it is. But if those basic things were taken care of, it frees you to do those things and get a job. And that book I just mentioned too, Nickel and Dime, what they found was that these companies who were hiring people who were formerly on welfare found that they were quite reliable and quite had a good work ethic. It's just that they needed that boost. So this notion that people are lazy and don't want to work and this money is going to keep me home, it's just that, a notion.
Not motivated going to work and that type of thing. It's a question of how much do they produce when they are at work. Now, one of the fundamental principles of economics, one of the most fundamental principles that's very rarely breached is that when you increase the price of something, a lesser quantity will be demanded. Labor is not any different to beer or cokes or anything else. If the price of labor is increased, all other things being equal, less of it will be demanded. And if you look at the statistics particularly in the United States and in Europe, where there is a high minimum wage, there is high unemployment, and that high unemployment.
Not in the studies I've read. Absolutely not.
Almost without exception, and where that high unemployment arises is not in wealthy middle class people. It arises in people who have got very little to offer from an educational point of view or from a training point of view, so that you find in cities like Detroit and Chicago, in Liverpool, in Manchester, Dundee, to be closer to Jonathan, there are large percentage of young people in particular who become unemployed. Now, another very important consideration is that when you consider wages, that's not the only good thing about working. Having a job means that you have to learn fundamental basic things like turning up in time, being able to work with colleagues, taking responsibility, looking forward into the future, as to how you get promoted and how you can do better. If people are prevented by the minimum wage from ever getting on the employment ladder, and this happens all the time in Europe and the United States, you are actually condemning people with potential into lives of poverty for the rest of their life. And I find it quite extraordinary that you can actually believe that if you increase the price of something, it will not affect the quantity which will be demanded.
Well,
it simply is not possible. It's simply not the case. Every product, every good in the world, with possible exception of things like diamonds or even gold, is subject to that qualification, that if you increase the price of it, a lesser quantity will be demanded.
Economics
I'm sorry, but that is the hard fact of life.
Economics is an art, not a science.
And the data from everywhere confirms that that is the case.
That is not true.
It is a case sometimes of financial assistance, versus work trade-off. Because I'll give you an example that I know firsthand of someone who was very eager to work and to do things, and they were trying to get on financial assistance, and they were eager to work. And you got anything else? But once they got on financial assistance, it was very difficult to find them. And what I found out is that this person, in the end, the rent got taken care of. They got a phone with some minutes on it. They got a grocery allowance. Plus, they had every other benefit, more than me in a sense, in terms of medical benefits and everything else. So there really is definitely a financial assistance versus work trade-off, because in some instances, some people who are working hard are getting less than some people that are getting financial assistance in terms of extra benefits, like getting your teeth fixed.
I was going to say, they say the same things about prisoners. They're up there getting 3 square meals a day, and
that's true.
And they're getting dental and medical care, and maybe we should put all seniors in prison. I mean, those are not strong arguments. In every situation, you're going to find that there are going to be those who abuse the system. When you look at that in totality, what you find is that is a minimal of all those who are on the system that actually do those sorts of things. But it's those kinds of things which are highlighted, which say this is a bad system.
But but it wasn't even an opportunity to abuse the system yet, because they just got on it. So the point I'm making is they just got on it, but then all of a sudden the motivation that the ignorance that they had dissipated. I'm not saying this happens in all cases. I'm just saying that this was an example that I witnessed firsthand. So they hadn't had an opportunity to abuse the system yet, because they just got on the system. But as soon as they got on, their attitude changed. So no one could, I'm not saying this happens in every case, but this was a clear example firsthand for me that I saw a person's attitude immediately change. So this must happen to other people.
And that's a very good point, because let me say, for young people, I'm the oldest guy here, so going back to when I was young was like going back into ancient history. But I can recall very clearly when I started to work at the age of 15, I might add. When I started to work, the least important part of my job was how much I made. What was important is I made connections, I learned things, I was able to turn up in time, I was able to dress properly, I was able to relate with other people. And that is what I learned when I was 15. Now, if I had not learned that because I was unemployed and have an opportunity to become employed until I was much older, say in my 20s, the chances of being successful are diminished dramatically by not having the opportunity to learn in your youth what is important. The wage is unimportant. What is important is the approach and the attitude towards work.
So are you saying that doesn't take place now? Is that your point?
That's my no. What I'm saying is that people concentrate on how much an individual is being paid. That's important. You know.
It usually comes from those who earn a
It's
lot.
actually critical. But what is important is you actually have a job and you learn responsibility.
Exactly. From those who are earning a lot, that's a fair argument.
If you prevent people from working by pricing them out of the market, you're in fact condemning them to a life of poverty. And I don't think that's a wise and proper thing to do.
All right, well, look, let's stop on that point right there, because it's gotten heated. We're going to come back and talk about this mindset, because that is something to do with mindset. So it's not the tangible, but it's the mindset. So when we come back to Hug Money right after this break, we're gonna discuss this some more and find out what our guests have to say.